All right. Who Owns the Future, Chapter 8, Mass Unemployment Events. The key question isn't how much will be automated, it's how we'll conceive of whatever can't be automated at a given time. And so we might end up applying anti-human values that define the new roles as not being genuine work. So without getting into too much of the details here, going into how manufacturing would be affected by automation, and talking about essentially at some point someone's probably going to automate it with fully automated robots, things like that, to try to undercut. But more significantly affecting manufacturing is stuff, if you look at 3D printing as sort of the model for what the future could hold for this. And it's very promising. So, right, you download from the internet a recipe or the design, whatever, and send it to your 3D printer, and it spits out whatever that thing is. And it's still in sort of its early days, but and it's still unknown how good it'll become. This is where he introduces the idea of little gotchas and annoyances of technology that make it a little bit more unpredictable, and can end up adding decades of uncertainty to the timing. But it seems fairly likely that 3D printing can close the various loops and become a fairly complete technology within this century. So the key here is to think about, once a 3D printer would be able to be deployed in a factory, it might as well be deployed close to where the product will be used. So being able to make things on the spot would remove a huge part of humanity's carbon footprint, which is transportation. Instead of fleets of container ships bringing whatever from Chicago or China, we'll print them out at home, or maybe at the neighborhood print shop. And instead of distribution of products or goods, it's going to be the things that make up that the 3D printer uses to produce stuff. And if that's all you're really transporting, it's a good time to rethink transporting our distribution models for that. And it's theoretically very possible that we could have what he's describing as goops. It's the substance that the 3D printers are using. There's a couple hundred of them being used right now. And so it's theoretically very likely that we'll be able to have enough different substances to produce just about anything that we could imagine, including stuff like phones, tablets, guitars. All of that stuff can be created through 3D printing. And it's hard for people to wrap their heads around the idea of producing something reproducing itself. But that's what 3D printing can do. You send in the designs for another 3D printer and it would spit that out. And so it's very likely that someone's first 3D printer will actually just be 3D printed from their friend or their neighbor. So initial thought, very positive benefit for the 3D printing would be in the world of recycling. Today, the process is less than ideal, better than where we started, but still not perfect. But with 3D printing, when something is created, it would exist on in a cloud or in a network, and so we could have deep production stations where you would go and recycle whatever the thing could be. It could be anything, and it will be able to identify it, and the makeup of that product, the various goop materials, and be able to disassemble it and then reuse that stuff. So a radical change could happen like in clothing, daily clothes, where essentially you would never have to own anything long term or store it. You could print out your outfit for the day, and if you were using 3D rendering like technology like Xbox did with the Kinect, it would be custom tailored to your body. You could print it out, wear it for the day. When you get back, you could recycle it, and those materials could be recycled for your next outfit. And what's interesting here is talking about, even further down the road, like what would happen. It's likely a counterculture would pop up of value in handmade products, as well as being able to compensate people with good style. Whatever. But then we get into the next section on cars. Humans are terrible drivers. We kill each other in car accidents so frequently that the toll has become a more deadly problem than wars or terrorism. It's one of our biggest sources of death and pain. We've made a lot of progress, and he mentions that his mother died in a car accident. So what could be more compelling? He argues one of the most compelling technologies to advance. But there's more to it than just the convenience factor and safety factor. Stoplights would generally go away. Cars would simply know when there's no other cars coming, no pedestrians. They could just proceed without stopping. And so that would bring a huge gain in energy efficiency, since the vehicles wouldn't have to accelerate from stop nearly as often. And city driving would become almost as efficient as freeway driving. Now, there's obviously unknowable consequences of this, and with something as consequential as driving, even if we get these instances down to nearly zero, when something does happen, it could be really big. And there's a tendency with humans that, if technology causes it, it somehow stings more than when humans do. Plus, and then think about, again, this is all tied to economic ideas. So a giant portion of the global middle classes works behind a wheel. Many have entered middle class life for the first time as a taxi driver or truck driver. A traditional entry ramp into economic sustenance for fresh arrivals to big cities like New York would be gone. So, and then he gets into this thing. It's a common thread with a lot of these arguments across not just the economic side of things, but if cars will never be able to be completely autonomous, like there's going to be a human factor to at least tell it where to go. And especially in the early days, but even down the road, if this was a common experience, the human input for this would be providing the network with valuable data. So will the rider be compensated for providing that valuable data? So, and then we move into a new section. The middle classes that have already lost their levies and economic dignity to siren servers are sometimes called the creative classes. They include recording musicians, journalists, and photographers, to name a few. There were also a significantly larger number of people who supported these types of creators, like studio musicians and editors who enjoyed good jobs, meaning they have security and benefits. Those who have grown up in a networked era might have trouble understanding opportunity lost here. So there's a pattern that's emerged in which holders of academic posts related to internet studies, basically talking about the irony of academics supporting the decline of the creative classes. Higher education could be Napsterized and vaporized in a matter of a few short years. In the world of the new kind of network wealth, towering student debt has become yet another destroyer of the middle classes. Why are we still bothering with higher education in the network age? We have Wikipedia and a world of other tools. You can educate yourself without paying a university. All it takes is discipline. Tuition pays for making discipline a little bit more structured, getting some extended years of parental support in a place with a quad, beer, and a certification. You also meet elite friends. But all of these benefits could be had in less expensive ways. And that's becoming truer every day. So you can get all of the information that you need, right? And you can find social interaction if you are motivated. So, like, why spend a ton of money? Okay, I guess, as for the years of parental support, it is turning out that in a Napsterized overall economy, more and more graduates stay with their parents well after college anyway. Why spend a ton of money supporting kids in college for 4 years when the same money could last longer to put them up somewhere cheaper? So like all of the elements of university as it has existed and it currently exists, you can recreate in significantly cheaper ways today. And so like those additional value points, those additional selling points to university, like making friends, the social interaction, sort of that dip your toes into independence. The cost of university is starting to outweigh even those things. So, you know, why spend your money on that? Your parents could put you up somewhere else for cheaper, and you could, if you were disciplined, you could teach yourself everything that you need to know. It's tricky for me. I want to note this actually, like immediately after saying that. Sometimes university provides you with that discipline and that structure. But you could also enroll in something comparable to get that direction. I would have to noodle on that a little bit more, but he noted he noted, like, he's not discounting, the value of education, and he's all for, what they provide a lot of the time, but it's considered the height of hipness to eschew a traditional degree and unequivocally prove yourself through other means. So some people that dropped out of college: Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Mark Zuckerberg. Peter Thiel of Facebook and PayPal fame started a fund to pay top students to drop out of school, since the task of building high-tech startups should not be delayed. Additionally, the pace of the world and the way that technology moves things, our current structure of education just can't keep up with that. And then he noted his experience. He dropped out as well. That the very thought of slogging through someone else's procedures to gain abstract approval seemed unacceptably retro and irrelevant. And so, the counter to that, like something like the Khan Academy is maybe the most celebrated effort to bring free education to anyone with online access. They did this, and it might do great good, but he mentions that he does have some qualms about how these efforts are unfolding. The concerns are similar to those he's expressed before. Treating all subjects as if they were technical subjects don't fall within the project of this book. Never mind. The question to ask here is whether online efforts of this kind could create siren servers, even nonprofit ones, which end up undermining the finances and security of academics. It's not a comfortable topic. And he says, of course, I appreciate how beautiful it is to bring great educational materials to people who might not have had access to them before. And he's also worked toward that goal. But that doesn't cancel out a systemic problem that's accelerated by the same activity. Here's how it could go. Students at colleges ranked lower than Stanford would tune into Stanford seminars and gradually wonder why they're paying their local lower ranked academics at all. If locals are to remain valuable once a globalized star system comes into being over the internet, it can only be because they are present and interactive. So, why should we keep on paying for colleges? Why pay for all of those levies that benefit a privileged class of middle-class people? All the pensions and health plans, the insurance, the soaring expenses that are crushing the nation under student debt. So ultimately what we need to do is find a way to make education more available and make the career benefits of education more attainable. How did anyone ever afford education? Society will not be able to afford the risk of the great debt load that students collectively take on. Austerity will force a contraction of government support of the academy everywhere in the world at once. Is it a coincidence that formal education is starting to become impossibly, cosmically expensive just at the moment that informal education is starting to become free? No coincidence. It's just another little fractal reflection of the big picture of the way we've designed network information systems. The two trends are a single trend. And I've noted here, it's the same structure, it's a different degree. Okay, And then finally, he talks about one of the bright spots in the future of middle class employment is usually healthcare. And then talks about how robots in healthcare have challenges that extend a little bit further than some of the challenges in other disciplines. But as an example, Japan is likely going to be in a position where they're almost forced to take on robotic healthcare. And once that happens, it might be the allure of that might be too much for other countries to resist. And the ways that kind of manifests are, it's really challenging to provide 24/7 support for any, inconvenience, any discomfort or, emergency, whatever. And the fear of litigation becomes really a big factor in this. So insurance companies will use computers to weasel out of liability and to extract ever larger payments. When you turn action into software, then no one gets blamed for what happens. And so hiring a human nurse will mean paying for that person's health insurance and taking on unpredictable legal liabilities for the mistakes that person might make, like leaving a floor wet. Both of these drags on the ledger that will be amplified by network effects, just as what happened with mortgage risks. And so robots sort of help them evade the liability aspect of this. And the key reason to avoid acknowledging that there's real skill in doing what robots can't do and hiring people for real jobs will not be to keep the immediate expenses low, but to reduce the amplified liabilities of the network age. So there will be plenty of dead-end jobs without security or benefits. And additionally, so again, that's an element where that's kind of fucked up. But then additionally, the programming of these caregiving robots will be utterly dependent on Quad software that will be in turn dependent on millions of observations of situations and outcomes based on, nurses or caregivers. So are those nurses and caregivers that are helping to develop this software that's ultimately going to take their job, replace them, are they going to be compensated for that? And then there's this interesting idea of how this could affect pharmaceuticals, the pharmaceutical industry. And he creates the idea of these chips that you would tattoo into your skin. And just how this one thing would disrupt or have the same economic disastrous impact across a number of different industries. But I don't want to totally get into that one right now. I like that more as a exploring the future type of thing.